It's
Yeah.
just so I think that constitutes noise. I asked the girls, we sit and did a scientific, pseudoscientific observation
Yeah.
to really empathize with the neighbors last week. And we sat on the church steps and we observed. And I asked the girls, what do you notice? And they said, well, it's quieter than my street in Ventura.
I see. I see.
So, a lot of
Yeah.
improvements have happened since August.
Mm.
Um, one of the previous tenants, as you know, required parents to stay on site.
Mm.
That tenant is gone.
Mm.
So the parking situation was surprisingly light. I was shocked.
Mm.
And in fact, when I went to circle the block, I went down Santa Rita, which is the next street over where icing people aren't parking. It was packed. Every available spot was used. And I thought, well, maybe there are really parking considerations happening in this neighborhood, but I don't think it's icing related. All the parking around the First Baptist Church were mainly open, or they were used for, drop off. And
Yeah. What do you think is taking up the parking then?
I don't think there is. I think that was a legitimate complaint last year.
Oh, I see.
With the previous tenants.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
But what's great is I think that the church and the icing program are really in tune with and listening to what the neighbors have complained and genuinely attempting to satisfy their needs. And the parking, we have a parking protocol I helped them to devise last summer, where the one street doesn't have people fighting for space. You come in, you can easily see whether there's a bike in the lane. You can, with reasonable safety, get in and get out and not cause any kind of problems or fights over spaces or whatever. That's new. That wasn't there last year, right? And you've probably seen the postings, drop-off zone only and things like that. So right now, what I think that the neighbors may be concerned about that still exists is the theoretical future tenant. What if another tenant comes back that has badly behaved, participants somehow that aren't as, willing to listen to the neighbors? And it's hard to fight a theoretical, right? All we know is right now we've got a program that has 250 girls in it, 150 of which are Palo Alto residents.
Sure. Yes,
right?
Community benefit.
Yeah,
Sure.
and these are constituents too, and the complaints, I think the households complaining are like less than 10. It's something like 6.
So what do you think should be done to help mitigate some of the perceived challenges that the nearby residents face? What do you think would be the right thing to do?
Well, I think having better traffic enforcement on that street goes a long way, and that's regardless of what happens with the CUP.
Sure.
Right? Understanding that that is a special pathway for bikes and connecting schools to the bike boulevard.
No, I happen to go by that all the time when I go to City Hall. So,
well, it is a lightly used but
no,
popular direction. Are you biking?
When I go to school, I'm usually on my skateboard, but when I when I go by there, so
I think that would be helpful. I think also, understanding that that there's a difference between a church use and a non-church use, and that maybe that was conflated a bit in how the CUP recommendation came from the PTC. They wanted to be able to have events, but maybe they can still have church events, but not the other kinds of events in those hours, right? So really understanding the difference. Also, there's multiple buildings, there's public parking, like some of these concerns may be poorly informed, right? Like, oh, there's only 8 parking spaces. Well, there's ample public parking. This is city streets. So that's not the issue. The issue is more, can we safely park?
What if we put up what if the church had like those car lifts to create more parking on site? Do you think that would help?
No, I don't think it's even necessary. If you observe the parking, there's ample parking. It's not packed.
Okay.
That's no longer an issue. I don't know if it was a common issue during the previous tenant, but yeah, I don't think parking is at a premium in that area.
Okay.
I think people are.
What about the church? I mean, I think one of the reasons why they were renting out to community groups is because fiscally, right? They're having budget issues, right? At least that's what I heard. I'm not sure if it's true or not. But is the church okay? I mean, are they going to be able to?
Yeah. So the church, there have been claims from the neighbors that the church may not be a legitimate church. I don't know how we define, how
Well,
many.
I'm not sure I heard
congregants.
that. What I heard was just that the church, like
All the churches need income. All
Yeah,
the churches are my son's also in a boys choir, which is in a different church in Palo Alto, also with street parking. Right? This is, they go to the St. Grayson Lutheran for the CMT in the summer. We also use street parking, even though they have a larger lot.
Well, street parking is public parking.
It's
right?
public parking, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say, as far as activities that raise, supplement the income for churches, and we have those in Palo Alto because we have a lot of expenses. Palo Alto is an expensive place, and
Sure.
and also there's a community benefit to that because it allows programs that couldn't afford to rent
Sure.
other space have somewhere to be.
Yeah.
So I think that's a mutual benefit. As far as the size of the church, it's relatively small, but we have other small churches, right? We have certain, like Russian Orthodox Church may have a smaller congregation. We have smaller churches. What's interesting is we don't have a lot of Baptists out here, and people may not understand how important music is to the Baptist faith. I grew up in the South, and I've been around a lot of Baptist church. My mother was Baptist. It's everywhere. Music is everything. It is part of their worship. And I learned recently that icing came out of a mission of the church.
Oh, wow.
They helped seed fund this startup, this nonprofit startup that has become hugely successful.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so they're really connected, and I think that's one of the reasons the Icing family really wants to stay there, because this is
So that's probably one of the reasons why the church actually has a lot of music related things.
Yes, exactly.
I see.
Exactly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and if it was a larger church, there would be a larger choir practicing there.
I see.
The same thing would be happening with congregants. But right now, this is a way to bring music to that area.
I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Okay. That's something every day.
So yeah, I think there's a dark side to this conversation too, which is when we ask the council to help us figure how to manage. We're trying very hard to address the concerns of the neighbors. The future concerns is hard to address. We don't know who future tenants might be, but I assume they'll be non-profits, based on the guidance we've got so far. But the tenants are very concerned, and they started approaching the girls during practice.
Oh, really?
And
the residents do?
Yeah. And
what do they do?
Videotaping.
Videotaping?
Yeah, and so
like the little kids?
Yeah, which is not okay.
Like walking them in, like as they walk into the church?
Yeah, on the outside of the grounds.
Oh.
And
is that common?
Since this dispute has been going on, it has become more common. It's happened a few times. The most recent time, I believe, the choir director called the police. So there's a police report about it.
Wow, that can be very disconcerting.
It is. It scares the kids, and it's not neighborly, and it kind of undermines their.
Why are they trying to prove something? Is that?
They may be looking for documentation as part of their presentation. I don't really know. Like, I want to assume the best, but
is that even legal? I guess you're allowed to do that, right?
They say they are.
Yeah.
We were concerned about it. They didn't have permission from the children's parents.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, we don't want this to escalate. This needs to be one of those things that we have the right channels to manage.
How often does that occur?
My
like every day?
understandings happened 2 or 3 times. I actually went to observe this week and I didn't see them.
Okay.
So I hope it's not
So maybe they're stopping it.
hopefully.
Okay.
But the intimidation, the bullying, I would say that the pastor feels a little bit bullied. Some times he's been caught off guard with, we're going to have a mediation meeting, but then it turns into, lawyers kind of ganging up on him, and he's frustrated, and that I don't want to speak for him or for the neighbors, but it's really hard to navigate the situation if we let it escalate. I think we need to find ways to calm it down and say that we have addressed almost, as far as we can tell, every issue, right? The noise, the traffic safety, the parking, all these have been mitigated and successfully. This is a success for the neighbors since August.
Sure.
Right? So now all we're saying is, can we have permission, official permission to stay in this site? And I think that's really what it boils down to.
So when you look at staff's recommendation, what's your thoughts about it?
Staff, I was at the PTC.
Did you see the report?
Yes,
Okay.
and I was at the PTC where it was amended. So staff said, when questioned by the commissioners, where did these numbers that you suggested come from, right? Maximum 50 capacity, where'd that come from? There was no basis. So it seemed on the arbitrary side, according to staff. And over again, the hours, well, we just guessed. The capacity, we just guessed, things like that. So what we did in response was say, well, this program to exist needs to have 120 on site. Now, those are in 2 different buildings, right? At different times, right? So you may have a class of 40 at 4 o'clock and a class of 20 at 6 o'clock and another class in a different building from 5 to 7 with 50 or 60 kids in it. These are not massive, but if we don't have that, we can't do those programs. So for example, that 60 is 2 sets of girls that are 30 each coming together to harmonize. That they're called the harmonics, right? So if you have just one rehearsing
we gotta get going.
independently, So those numbers from PTC were based on data, whereas the numbers from the staff were self-admitted as guesses.
Okay, so would you want staff report approved as is or not?
I would love to see it approved with the PTC's recommendations.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Carrie, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming in.
If you have any questions, follow up or whatever, let me know.
Okay, well, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, David here already?
Yeah, there.